Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Noxcast, an Equinox news recap podcast. I'm your host, Charlotte King. I'm the managing executive editor of the Equinox.
And I'm Nathan Hope. I'm the administrative executive editor of the Equinox. And this week we are joined by Film Society Secretary and incoming President Mariah.
Hi, what's up?
It's good to have you. I want to start off by just asking you to tell people a little bit about what Film Society is and sort of what your experience has been and what you currently do in the organization.
Yeah, so Film Society is a club every Wednesday where members, film majors or not, can bring in a movie if they want and pitch it to the club. Whatever gets the top 2 votes, we vote on again blindly, and then we watch the movie that wins. It's a great club community. And then on the movie side of it, on the weekends we are a movie theater, so it's completely run by the student e-board with me in it. My role for the past 3 years since I was a freshman has been secretary, so basically just taking notes at the meetings that we have, doing the emails, writing on the whiteboard during our general member meetings. Now I am going to be president, so I reach out to distributors like A24 and Neon to get movies for the weekend. And it's a very costly job too, with all the money that we need to give the movie distributors, so that I'm still trying to figure out, but yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, you guys do a lot of work just in the Putnam Theater in general, the Putnam Theater over at the Redfern Arts Center, just in terms of, like, being very knowledgeable, being a resource about the theater, because, you know, there's also special events and stuff like that comes through, so definitely, I think it's a big job.
Yeah.
You know, I've been coming to Film Society meetings since I got to Keene State, and I've been bringing Nate along for a while now too. But yeah, we love it, and it's such an awesome space for just appreciating film on campus and appreciating, you know, that which you wouldn't necessarily catch in you know another just like local theater or anything like that. But so again, we're thrilled to have you, and definitely as we kind of move into recent happenings in general, as well as our editorial and a news story that kind of is in between the paper that we just did and the one that we're doing now. It's been crazy, but a lot of happenings with regards to every student organization and the budgets. It's now budget season, as we've spoken about previously on the podcast, and the big one in terms of student assembly meetings was this past Tuesday night, and that was where the budgets for all student orgs were voted on and approved with some amendments, and it was a big showing, and definitely, you know, one of the reasons why we wanted to have Mariah on was because Film Society had a big presence there. There were a lot, you know, the whole e-board, but also a lot of general members there to just sort of voice why it's so important to give Film Society the funding that it needs to continue screening. So, Mariah, I also wanted to just kind of turn that over to you and let you talk about what that experience was like and kind of where you guys were at going into that.
Yeah, so we didn't find out about our budget cut until the day prior, and it was because of you guys, so thank you. Movies are very, very, very expensive, so we originally asked for a lot more than we received, and if we were to get the budget that they recommended, we would only be able to do like 6 movies a semester and get rid of our Rocky Horror Picture Show, which has been happening for over like 30 years. So it was something that I was kind of freaking out about, going in as president and getting rid of traditions that we've had since before I was born. So our treasurer, Ben Martins, and I, we kind of met on Monday, like right after we got the email, and did like a whole plan B just in case. I reached out to like probably 6 past board members. Wyatt Codd, our past president before our current Ryan Seven right now. And then we got like a secretary, social media manager who was on WKNH as well. And then we got Anna Costa, who was president way before my time. I think it was Ryan's freshman year. And we got all letters from them. We got letters from other people. I reached out on Discord to our general members and was just like, hey, if you guys can like send a little something, that's great. And then when I found out that members could go, I just put a little something in the chat like, hey, if you want to support us, that's great. If not, totally understand. And we got a lot of people coming, and honestly, it was very, very touching watching all of them talk in front of the board, kind of saying like, don't take this away from us, especially some of the members who have been a little more quiet or have not really talked a lot outside of Film Society. I was very touched by that as well. There were tears in my eyes the whole time, I'm not gonna lie. It was just a very big sense of community, and I'm glad that other people noticed it as well. We try really hard to make people feel welcomed and belonged in our club, so I'm really glad it worked out. But
Definitely.
yeah.
So yeah, you gave remarks, and you know, the e-board delivered some remarks from those past board members as well. And you know, there were a lot of there were definitely, you know, I know Keene State Media Productions had a big presence there, WKNH, some other clubs. Nate also delivered some remarks. If you want to talk about sort of your perspective on the meeting as well.
Yeah, I had originally prepared like a speech that was primarily regarding the stipend issue that we've talked about previously on Noxcast and sort of the past month what we had been working on, but after receiving the agenda and receiving the budget breakdown of what each club got, I sort of quickly pivoted and focused more on the aspect of the transparency, because the second that we received the agenda and the breakdown of like the budgets, we knew like this was something that had to be sent out to all the people that we knew at least that were impacted, because you know, there were such drastic cuts. I already knew just like right off looking at like Keene State Media Productions, you see like the equipment cut. That's like their entire club is revolving around equipment. You're looking at like SAC's entire spring concert. You're looking at, you know, Film Society's screening rights, like screening rights for a movie theater. It's like you're taking away movies for that. Like that just seemed ridiculous to me on its face. But sort of in my role primarily as like a leader, not as much of like a journalist in this instance, but more as like someone who cares about involvement and someone who like has been working with and like talking with all the people that are impacted by this, and like so many conversations over the past month. I hit on the transparency aspect and really just how sort of ridiculous it was for how everything went down. But I was really pleased to see how many people spoke, and I think it's like a testament to what we've always talked about on Noxcast about the civic engagement aspect. I think this is really such a shining example of your voice can make a difference, and I think, you know, everybody who came out was so sort of brave and just had like to have the confidence to speak up on something. I know it's not easy. I was like just staring down at my prepared remarks the whole time. I didn't like look up, but I wanted to say my piece as and sort of speak for how I felt about it. Because despite, you know, the Equinox budget not being affected, it's way bigger than us. It's, you know, the future of involvement here at Keene State. There's so many benefits that come with a campus that has not just a strong media presence, but also a strong, you know, movie theater. You have a student-run radio station. You have like all these opportunities that other schools of similar size and stature don't have. And I think it should be of utmost importance to support them in any way that we can. So it was really great to see everybody that came out. I'm really proud of everybody for doing that and standing up for what they believed in, and I'm glad to have played the small part in sort of just getting the word out to people.
Yeah, I definitely to echo what Mariah had said, I definitely felt sort of the emotion in the room of seeing everybody and a lot of people that we know just kind of, you know, take that opportunity to voice what they think is so just valuable about the level of involvement that we have and opportunities that we have through all of these organizations to really, you know, be dedicated to fostering these amazing spaces to learn and to connect with people and to just like really, you know, also like Nate said, there are a lot of schools of similar size that don't have that, and so we're very lucky to have had these organizations for as long as we have, and definitely it's essential to voice the support of that, continuing. And also, yeah, it was kind of, I did have the thought that it was nice to, I guess, practice what we preach in terms of the moral of Noxcast being civic engagement always, and then there we were. And I do think, I really want to commend WKNH because, when we say that people walked out of that meeting, feeling at least somewhat just better than they walked in. I mean, that really comes down to the fact that WKNH was willing to step up and, continue to keep their stipend allocations at the level that had previously been dictated by the resolution. For those who weren't able to make it to the assembly meeting, the resolution is now repealed. That was part of the business that was sort of moved to the front of the meeting. And so, I thought that was a really great display of, that sense of community and the fact that we all have to kind of be in this together. I do think that going forward, one of the biggest just like points that kind of hurts is the Slash to Sax spring concert for next year. That's just such a sizable amount that I don't think anybody really can look at that and have a solution right now. And so that is definitely, it hurts, it hurts, I think, as a community. And certainly, I know for the SAC board, that's really tough right now to grapple with that. But, I think that if nothing else, the fact that, some of the other orgs like Film Society and like Media Productions, now being in that stronger place after the reallocations of those funds from WKNH, strengthening that community now puts all of us in a better position to go forward and try to support the orgs that are still going to experience those struggles. And that's definitely something that, I think a lot of us are in communication or just trying to sort of fathom how we can try and do that going into this new fiscal year. As far as our editorial specifically, that was also something that had to kind of pivot last minute because some people might not know, but we produce the newspaper on Tuesdays, which is when Student Assembly meets. And so we all took a break from making the newspaper and went over to the assembly meeting and then had to rush back and look at the editorial and say, okay, where does that put us with this? And so we definitely had to, go in and make some fairly substantial changes just in terms of like, we wanted to hit on, like Nate did with his remarks, that point of transparency and why that's so valuable and why that's essential for all orgs to be able to continue to just function and know what's going on. And so, one of the big points, one of the big pieces of information that came out of that assembly meeting being the fact that the student assembly clerk didn't previously know that part of his responsibility was to be posting the meeting agendas and minutes on OwlNet. We wanted to include that in the editorial and just sort of point out the fact that, like, we respect the fact that he was outright with that. There was no sort of trying to sweep that under the rug in any way. It was just, hey, I'm sorry. And, going forward, we're going to try and adhere to proper process with that. And so far, it seems like that is the case. We did check Student Government's OwlNet page, and the minutes from this Tuesday's meeting are already up, as well as back postings of, I think, all of the assembly meetings from the remainder of the 2024 spring semester. So there are still some that are missing, but I imagine that there's probably an ongoing search. I don't know that for sure, but that would be my guess to dig those up and hopefully backpost those as well. And so we really appreciate that. I think that that's something that definitely kind of went under the radar, seemingly even for Assembly themselves. And so, I definitely, I'm sure there's a lot of bells and whistles, basically. And so, I think we can understand where some things can kind of get lost in the shuffle. We still, think that it maybe points to some kind of organizational error. The fact that maybe the training needed to occupy that position on Assembly might be lacking in certain instances, if that's something that can slip through the cracks, something that important. But, again, it's a step in the right direction. And I think we're definitely grateful for that.
I was glad to see that he owned up on that front. It was really a display of like good governance. And I think our main concern really now is just how it went on for a year like that, and how nobody else on Assembly and how nobody even on the student body or anybody in like administration could have seen that was not happening.
Or us.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't even know until, we got word of that like stipend resolution passing after the fact. And then we were thinking like, well, how come we weren't able to find that beforehand? And then we looked at the ALNet page and we looked at the bylaws. They are supposed to post agendas and minutes. They weren't doing that. And then we started thinking, so they just haven't done that. And then so it sort of became a bigger thing where it was like, okay, so now the issue has sort of changed in some ways.
Big spiral.
So yeah, I mean, I'm glad we were able to put a spotlight on that. I wish we would have caught it earlier as well. But I think it'll be something to look at going forward.
Yeah, and it also takes a lot of like courage from both ends, being able to admit that you messed up your job and being able to tell them like, hey, you're not doing your job right. So I thought it was a very powerful moment in the committee meeting on Monday or Tuesday, sorry. But I also we didn't know about the stipends until we got our budget recommended. So I was like, oh, we have a little bit of extra money in that section. So I'm wondering, and also speaking of stipends, I just want to say again, like a big thank you to WKNH. What they do is not easy. They run a whole radio show. And it means a lot that they decided to help us out and help KSMP out. So I just want to say thank you again to them. And Film Society's trying to figure out another way to say thank you to them too. So, yeah.
For sure. I think we can shift to our top story from news from this past paper. This comes from senior reporter Elias, shout out. And the fact that enrollment has increased for the first time in 8 years. So this is kind of huge. And I want to extend an extra shout out to Elias for the fact that, so he spoke with MB Lufkin from the president's cabinet, who's the vice president of enrollment and engagement. And he also, like, unprompted went out during Admitted Students Day and talked to some of the admitted students who were visiting. We didn't ask him to do that. He just went out and decided to talk to some people about why they were interested in Keene State and what sort of makes it unique. But no, yeah, this is great news just for the overall health of campus and the ability to, continue to build a student body and support for higher ed in general. Retention is also looking really, really great. I think it's 94.5%, something like that. So yeah, I think especially with the fact that, we're looking at some system-wide budget cuts coming up pretty soon. It's nice to think that maybe there's some good news on the horizon in terms of again, just the overall health of higher ed.
I like to think that part of it might be just some engagement with the news and sort of looking at what's happening at other institutions. I mean, we don't want any of those things to happen, but I guess Keene State is fortunate now to not have to do some of the drastic measures that we're seeing at Plymouth, for instance. And I think, there's a lot of interest in sort of the liberal arts mission of Keene State, probably, from what I understand. And I think in terms of like differentiating the campuses, I think you're going to see more and more of that. And I think having our spot in that, and then having such like a strong community surrounding us that like supports art spaces and stuff, is probably going to continue to aid in that enrollment and retention. And I think, it sort of also ties in with, our involvement opportunities as well. So I think there's a lot to be said about the previous discussion about student orgs and enrollment and retention here.
Yeah, I'm a tour guide for the film department, and I'm on the orientation team. So, talking to prospective students a lot is like part of my job. And honestly, like, it's awesome, if I'm going to be blank, to see their face kind of light up when I talk about campus life and I talk about the arts, because I feel like a lot of other campuses don't really focus on the arts as much as we do. And so, like, when I'll talk about, like, Film Society or KSMP or even the Equinox, I think it's nice for them to know that they have a voice here and their voice will be heard no matter what. So, just, like, talking to them about that and talking to parents about that, too. Parents are always very nervous if their child's going to fit in. And knowing that there's a community for everyone on this campus is very nice to hear and reassure. So I think Keene has that going. We have a great community. And also, like, outside of the campus, downtown, very supportive for a lot of orgs, too. We have a lot of partnerships with them, too, so.
And I think with, like, our part of things, too, is the Equinox traditionally sets up a table in the MAC along with the departments in the MAC. And sort of we have our own interactions with incoming students, particularly interested in, like, the art spaces. Not always interested in just journalism, but, they see the fact that there's students at this table, and then they want to sort of talk about, what do you got going on in terms of involvement? Or they might just ask, like, hey, can you just honestly answer this question for me? Because you guys are the news, so, just tell me what's up. So I always love helping out within Mid-Students Day and sort of seeing all the people filter through and go into, like, the film table, too, and then the graphic design, and there's communications as well, and sort of just seeing people pursue their interests. And obviously, we always hope that they come to Keene State because that's beneficial for us and beneficial for every org. And, anyone who's involved knows that, like, it's such a critical part. You're always recruiting. You're always looking to strengthen your org. So I think that, it's just a great experience.
Yeah, I think also in terms of, I noticed in this article in particular, there were at least a couple people who were like interested in specifically like the education program. And so when we talk about like differentiating the campuses throughout the system and sort of the focuses that Keene State has, I think, we're looking at, we're hopefully looking at a future where the college can continue to kind of define itself by the strengths that it has always looked to, and really, that make it unique. And I think that seeing that that's still such a strong draw for prospective students is really encouraging in terms of the fact that, they know that Keene State is somewhere that they can look to if, these kind of flagship programs that we offer are things that they are looking toward in terms of what they might want to do in the future. So yeah, no, really, really encouraging, and I'm hopeful to see, what that will bring in the future.
Mm-hmm. And as of right now, it's affordable too.
Right.
Like for students, we do a lot of scholarships and loans and everything. So I think that's also a great push for students to come here too, just knowing that they're wanted here.
Yeah, I mean, that was also something that was definitely, people mentioned that in the article, the fact that like when they're looking at schools that are going to serve their interests, we're currently very appealing because of the fact that it is so affordable. So I think that's great. Now let's go ahead and get into our region and state top story. This one is covering some happenings at UNH. I always like to try and see what's going on at the other system campuses when possible. But Yeah, this is an interesting one about there's a request put into the president of the university to try and establish UNH as a sanctuary campus. So kind of looking to benefit those who may be at risk of, being targeted by immigration enforcement. The president has denied that request, and I think the justification kind of is that it could potentially put more of a target on the university. From where I'm standing, I don't really see that. I think that when people are asking to have at least a relatively safe place to be, to experience higher ed, I think that there's not really that much in the way of complicated frills on that. They want a safe place, and there's ways to make that happen. So, I it's kind of disheartening to see, such a blunt refusal to even really consider the idea of making it a sanctuary campus. I don't know, obviously, like what exactly went into the decision-making process of that, but I definitely think it's something that would maybe be worth reconsidering. And for those who made the request, it would be worth, maybe digging in their heels a little bit to see if there's any, whether it's alternatives or just options for reconsideration on that. Because as we've talked about on Noxcast before, we're living in scary times. And, I think it's of utmost importance now more than ever to be willing to explore options as far as how to make students feel safe.
Yeah, I think like from the perspective of like a leader of a college or university, that it might seem like a hard line to like toe of trying to not have these retaliatory measures by like the federal government, for instance, by taking a measure like making your campus a sanctuary one. But also at the same time, I think it's worth doing. And then if it's something that you do get retaliated against, then you should pursue probably, going through the court system for that, because I feel like it's more important to do the right thing than to sort of prematurely back down, I guess. And we've already talked about some of like the risks that are and the things we're seeing with like those on student visas and immigration officials sort of going about targeting, higher ed in particular and those who are in it. So I think it's important now more than ever to make sure everyone feels safe on campus. And due to the fact that there's just so many people who could potentially be at risk when you're talking about like international students with visas that previously were, you would never think that would present an issue of just, they validly got it, they're here, that's it. But now it is an issue, and I feel like those students do need to feel protected. So I think, it's the wrong move to sort of back down in a moment like this.
Yeah, I'm personally believe that you should put students first, their safety first. We are here because we want an education. We are paying you to get an education, so you should be able to protect us. I believe everyone deserves a right to a higher education, and it's very, I guess, just disheartening knowing that some of my peers are at risk to not get that because of how our country is right now. So yeah, it's very sad.
Definitely. But so in some happier news on our own campus, these hard switches sometimes are tough. But here at Keene State, over the past week or so, there's been a lot of Pride programming put on by KSC Pride, the student org, in collaboration with our Office of Diversity, Belonging, and Equity. And I think that, they did a really good job selecting the programming for this. I remember like seeing the social media kind of, advertising for that before the week started and just thinking, wow, we really kind of, we got it pretty good on this one. I think things like the like gender neutral clothing swap, for example, are something that like, I know people who have taken part in that and found some stuff they really like. And it's just an opportunity to again, kind of put students first and say like, hey, we see you, and, provide the opportunity for them to try and find a space that fits, or find clothes that fit. And so, yeah, overall, I think this is just like a great time to, and the other thing that I'll mention is the fact that, when we think Pride, a lot of us, I think, probably think of June. But it's nice, from my perspective, the fact that we're able to have Pride programming throughout the year here at Keene State, and again, kind of send that message of like, we still see you, even when it's not the officially designated month where we do this, even more so than usual. Like, we know that you're still here and you still matter, and so let's celebrate that.
Yeah, I think it was a great week of like programming, like mixing the entertaining and like enjoyable aspect, but also things that just materially help students as well. And I think, I thought about the quote that Ian Kaplan said about students reaching out to him and saying, just the fact we have them makes me feel more seen and makes me feel more safe on campus, whether or not like they're able to attend, or if they did attend, just the fact that it's there. And so props to the Office of Student Diversity, Belonging, and Equity for putting on the whole week of events in collaboration with KSC Pride as well, and making those communities feel heard and seen and safe at a time where so much is, going wrong, I guess, and so much uncertainty is there.
Yeah. I also really appreciate that it's for everyone too. Gender exclusive or inclusive, sorry. Um, like the clothing swap. I'm pretty sure they had like a drag show too, which is something that everyone can go to. I really think now and next academic year is really the time to be collaborating with our other orgs. I know Film Society's in the works of collaborating with DEI and everything. And I just think right now, more than ever, we all need to just form a bond, a community, and make sure everyone knows that they are wanted here. They're part of the community. So
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, again, just to harp on the point, I'm really proud of the work that people on this campus are doing to kind of further that mission of making people feel included. Like, that's the kind of thing that makes me feel good to be a part of the Keene State community, because it's really just, I would echo the sentiment, like, I'm not always able to attend, like, every day of the week of programming, but even just seeing, the photos from those events, and people being able to connect with one another, or again, like I said, seeing just the social media presence that like these groups have on campus, and saying like, I don't know, it makes me a little emotional.
yeah, it's heartwarming.
The top story from A&E actually was, we did some coverage of Artists Shouldn't Starve, which is a new group on campus that I think is still kind of finding their footing, but they've done a couple workshops so far, and it's kind of like providing support to the student artist community, and their most recent workshop specifically focusing on those who want to become art educators, and sort of going through some of the professional development and just basic training that it takes to get there and achieve that goal. I'm a big proponent of opportunities for professional development, accessible opportunities for professional development, because a lot of the time, it can be like, well, there's, some conference happening, and it's like, well, that's great, but then you have to factor in, registration and travel and this and that and whatever. But the ability to just like go connect with people in the student artist community here, and receive that level of kind of, at least just having the conversation about what it takes to achieve that goal, that's something that anybody can do. And I think that it's really awesome. So I was very happy. I've just been like seeing the posters that they've made around, which look awesome, by the way. So I guess that makes sense that it's an artist group, but that was just something that like I saw that and was like, can we figure out like what this like is that they're doing. But yeah, no, major support to them.
Yeah, it's always awesome to see like students find sort of like a niche, like unique and need that other students would also want to see on campus, and sort of taking the initiative to try to start something up is always cool. And I think, it's always a good thing to see. I'm glad when I have no experience of like starting something new. I just getting so deeply involved in something that's been around for almost 100 years now. It's like, I'm sort of just in a long line of people, but sort of being the first to go out of your way and do something is just, I'll always give props to anybody who does that.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't know that that was a thing, so I'm actually really excited to learn more about it now. I have a few friends who want to go into art and they don't know where to go, where to start because of art being kind of like not niche, but a lot of older generations don't really think you can have a career out of that. So I'm really glad that there is a club that's designated to help people get a career out of that. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's where I thought the name was really clever. The whole like versus the whole sort of starving artist idea, kind of turning that on its head and saying, well, it doesn't have to be that way. This can be viable and it should be viable. And then also to Nate's point, being coming from a place of sort of a more established thing and being part of the media presence. I really love the opportunity to spotlight the work that students are doing when they're starting something new, trying something that maybe just hasn't been done or that they perceive as a gap in terms of what's offered to students. I love the opportunity to kind of go there and say like, this is a thing, and this is why people on this campus feel that it's important, and then hopefully that can connect with, like Mariah says, I've got artist friends, who maybe sometimes feel like they don't really know what the path is in terms of how to, make that something viable when they enter the professional world. But, hopefully that can connect with people who are in that position and they can maybe find that community of people to help sort of point them where they want to go. So I think that's awesome. And then as far as sports, this is a piece from sports editor Jakob. I got to give a shout out. I must say, I think this might be one of my favorite that Jakob's done so far. Really, really solid stuff about the track team as they move into the outdoor season and just sort of talking to them about what that's like while also, looking back on the huge wins for them during indoor and the fact that, so many like broken records, really, really impressive records. And, I think that it's definitely, I get the impression it's difficult to maybe switch modes, but also the fact that they've basically just been go, go, go like this whole time. And, the mention that some of them have like been going since cross country and just like keeping the momentum up. And, the other part that stuck out to me is the fact that like the coaches have been telling them kind of not every one is going to be the best one, but you just have to go and you have to compete. And so I think that in terms of trying to kind of pace yourself through, these different phases of competition, like being able to kind of have that mindset of like, okay, it doesn't need to be the best one every time, but I have to be there, I have to be present, and I have to make that level of effort each time. I hope for the people on the team, that's a way for them to kind of stay in the right mindset and be able to keep that energy up as they enter outdoor.
Yeah, they had that quote in there also about like this is the most full the team has felt in a while, and sort of I feel like the track program in particular is like another aspect of Keene State differentiating itself. It's so like built out now, the recruitment's so like strong there, and I feel like so many people are sort of now attracted to it based on all like the headlines that everyone's seeing. Just sort of, so it's like an individual sport also, which is interesting to me, but also, there's such like a teamwork aspect at the same time, if that makes sense. Like they support each other so much. And I think, in terms of the story, like he got so many different sources and the perspective of coaches and then the athletes themselves. And it was just such a well put together thing of like sometimes a sport that's like hard for me as someone who never played it or never sort of paid much attention to it before, obviously being at the Equinox, but like, it was very engaging. And also thank you to Aiden Law for contributing photos because it was in a way which is always hard for us to get because obviously we're not going to go there, but thank you for that.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about the topic, but I do know a lot of people on that team, and they give it their all every time. It's kind of like a job for them, too, I can tell. It's early mornings, late nights, going away, doing homework on the bus or something, so props to them, honestly, and they've been killing it, so.
Yeah, I mean, like we've mentioned on the podcast before, we have people in the journalism space and even on the Equinox e-board who are, part of the track program. And yeah, definitely the just constant like training and competing. It's a lot, but they keep their head in the game. And yeah, I wish them all the luck in the world as they enter outdoor and continue, I'm sure, to really impress. So great stuff. And I think that brings us to the end of our news recap. Another one down already. As always, I'd like to extend our thanks to the composer of the music for Noxcast, our very own Equinox alum, Zach Keenan, as well as the designer of the graphic for Noxcast, our very own art director, Elijah Fisher, and of course the editor of Noxcast, our very own multimedia director, Jakob Hall. We will be back next week for another news recap here on Noxcast. Thank you very much for watching or listening. Until that time, I've been Charlotte King.
And I've been Nathan Hope, and thank you to Mariah for joining us.
Thanks for having me.